Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the world. Extending the greeting from Tokyo, Japan. Today, I'd like to discuss the issue of discharging a treated radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean, which was carried out by TEPCO and also decided by Japanese government from troubled nuclear reactors from Fukushima Daiichi Genpatsu, which means Fukushima's first nuclear power plant. Fukushima is like a name of the prefecture which locates 230 kilometers northeast from Tokyo. Before we get going, I'd like to talk about myself for the self-introduction. I have been a full-time journalist for 37 years. For the first 17 years, I was a staff writer of a national newspaper, one of major newspapers, and a national weekly news magazine. And also, after 2003, I became a freelancer, and also I worked as a full-time journalist since then. And I am one of very few journalists who has been covering meltdown crisis and also its aftermath of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. I am only one of the only 2 or 3 journalists remaining covering the issue in Japan. And the reason why I decided to make video in this in English is that there are very many misdecisions and misinformation prepared by TEPCO and Japanese government, and because Japanese mainstream media like newspapers, national newspapers, and also major networks. We have 6 networks and also 5 national newspapers in Japan. Very too friendly or too cooperative, whatever, to the government. And now they are not enthusiastic in reporting what is a misinformation or misdecision done by Japanese government and also TEPCO. So, as a freelance journalist who is free from that kind of restraint by the big news media corporations, I would like to inform the global public that 12 misdecisions and misinformation of Japanese government. Misinformation or disinformation, whichever you may call it, comes out from Japanese government propaganda claiming that treated radioactive water from Fukushima Daiichi is safe and does not cause any damage to our environment. So, I, personally speaking, or professionally speaking, I am neither pro or con over nuclear powers. But as a journalist, professionally, I cannot let this happen, this misinformation and misdecision. So let's begin with the first Japanese government very bad decision, misdecision of made by discharging the treated radioactive water into the ocean. Okay, and As you may know now, the ocean, the public sea, open sea, is a public global property of every country. Only exception is a territorial water, which is approximately 20 kilometers from a coastline. But the rest of the sea, as a whole sea, is open. It's called open sea, which is a public property of the world. And on the public open sea, free navigation is guaranteed. So, discharging even if treated radioactive water is like disposing house garbage into the public space. Let's say if your neighbor dump his or her house garbage into the public space, like a kid's playground, or let's say public park or whatever. As a member of community, you cannot tolerate that. Well, especially in Japan, we respect the cleanness of the public space. So from our culture, dumping garbage disposals to the public space is something we should not do. Morally and socially, it is intolerable. But sadly, Japanese government began the operation of discharging treated, end of the quote, radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean from August 24th, year 2023. This is a very bad decision, even if you put all the impacts on the environment aside. It is strategically and also politically, it's a very bad decision, because before August 24th, contamination, radioactive contamination from a nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi, was Japan's domestic issue. Those contamination was limited only on the soil of Japan. But now, Japanese government intentionally or unintentionally decided to spread it into the international problem, from a domestic Japan's problem into the global problem. So this is very bad decision, because just because open sea is a public property of the world, every country has a right to claim or criticize or support Japanese government decision. So, as you know, every national sovereignty has its own law, and each law only effective only on their soils. So even if Japanese governments say, okay, this treated radioactive water is safe, but other country national sovereignty would not agree, then what? The solution would be very, very difficult, because this is each country, each national sovereignty has different law, different culture, and environmental protection. So, in short, Japanese government made the solution of contamination of the nuclear power plant, the troubled nuclear power plant, more difficult than before. By far more difficult. So this is very bad move in my belief. Okay, then number 2 is the safety standard applied by Japanese government to discharged water. It's called Alps water. Alps is like a so-called decontamination system, ALPS. It has nothing to do with mountains. I am not sure what ALPS stands for, but Japanese government insists that the device ALPS will decontaminate the radioactive water to the safe level into to the environment. But please note that this criteria, the standard Japanese government apply to the treated water is that a human body can drink the treated water, but it's safe. Something like that. To be more accurate, if one human body drink the treated radioactive water 2 liters in a day until the age of 70 years old, it would cause no health problem, according to the Japanese government. But I must say that criteria is inappropriate. Why? Because even if some chemical material is safe in a human body, it does not mean it would be safe when discharged into the environment. The most unquestionable example is the carbon dioxide, CO2. As you may know, we exhale CO2, carbon dioxide, every day, every hour, every minute, every seconds. Right now, even right now, I'm exhaling CO2 into the environment. It means that CO2 is very safe even if taken in a human body, except for the air pollution, which is a level of CO2 is higher than 5% or something. But that is very exceptional, as you know. But we human beings all know by now that carbon dioxide is causing a climate change in a global scale after 300 years of accumulation in the atmosphere. Maybe since from the Industrial Revolution, which started in United Kingdom or France or Germany about 300 years ago. Then carbon dioxide accumulates little by little in the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, whichever. And now it causes a global, very terrible global climate change, global warming, global change, climate change, whichever you call it. And now CO2, carbon dioxide, is proven to be harmful to the human beings in the long term. So, in conclusion, Japanese government standard applied to the treated radioactive water is inappropriate because what they say is, to make a long story short, Even if you drink it, it's okay. It doesn't cause any problem. No problem. Don't worry. That is a claim. Okay. So the criteria which should be applied to chemical materials, especially radioactive materials discharging into our environment, should be different, must be different, like CO2. And we human beings has learned a great lesson with pain by CO2. If the chemical material cannot be proven to be safe when discharged in the environment, we should not discharge into the environment. That is called precautionary principles, as you may know. But unfortunately, Japanese government decisions of discharging the treated radioactive water is against precautionary principles. This is very funny and also ironic because Japanese government is announcing that they're gonna spend 1兆2000億円. 1兆2000億円 means like 1 trillion yen, which is like more than $10 billion in reducing non-carbon to realizing non-carbon society. So Japanese government, even Japanese government, know that carbon oxide is harmful when discharged, released into the environment. So they follow the precautionary principle in one hand, okay? But in the other hand, the same Japanese government is against this precautionary principle, which is discharging the treated radioactive water into the ocean. Because the safetiness in the long term, the safety of radioactive treated water in a long term, like 200 years or 300 years, has not been proven. Not at all. Not at all. So this is very funny, very strange to me. Because there is a big contradiction over two policies within the same Japanese government. Okay? Then, number 3, in a criteria and standard the Japanese government applies to the treated radioactive water, totally disregards long-term effect or impact on environment. They did not even discuss the long-term impact on environment caused by that treated radioactive water. This is also very strange to me because, as you may know by now, there is the phenomenon named biological concentration in a food chain. Let's say one chemical material is discharged in a small portion into the environment. A very small creatures like jellyfish or octopus eat it. Then the bigger fish eat these octopus and jellyfishes. And the bigger fish like tuna or whales eat them. And the higher you go up to the food chain, the more the concentration of the chemical elements becomes. This is called food chain concentration. In Japanese, we call it 食物連鎖 and also 生物濃縮 biological concentration. We human beings have learned great lessons about environmental protection. But if you discharge some chemicals, especially harmful materials, into the ocean, concentration through the system of the food chain is inevitable. So I am very highly concerned that the radioactive materials discharged from Fukushima Daiichi will be concentrated in oceanic food chain system. That is very big concern. It also, the concern is shared by Japanese public too. Okay. And then, but very strangely and sadly, Japanese government did not pay attention or apply this long-term impact on environment, which is caused by treated radioactive water. Okay. And then number 4. We should have, Japanese government and the TEPCO could have kept those radioactive contamination on land, on Japanese soil. That is true. They could have avoided dumping them into the ocean, because there are many alternative means to keep radioactive contamination on land. Number 1 is evaporation, which was applied by the United States government in dealing with 3 Mile nuclear plant accident. 3 Mile Island nuclear accident also caused a meltdown in one reactor. Also, and it produced massive amount of the contaminated water, and they dried it naturally. They evaporated the water, and then in the bottom of the tank there was like a sludge. Sludge over radioactive materials. So they made it solidified this radioactive waste and contain it into the so-called metal cask and keep it into the non-inhabited desert of the state of Idaho. The other mean to keep radioactive contamination is a solidification by putting mortars, cements, into the radioactive water. This device, this facility is also used in United States. The nuclear site called Savannah River sites in the state of North Carolina. The North Carolina Savannah River site was producing the nuclear warheads, but after the end of the Cold War, they stopped operation. And in process of cleanups of the nuclear waste, they found out massive amount of the radioactive contamination waters. So they, Nuclear Regulatory Committee, NRA, of the United States government decided to solidify the radioactive water by putting cement and make it solid and store them on ground. Now you see that there are many alternative ways instead of discharging radioactive water into the ocean. Of course, Japanese government could have used that mortarization by using cement because surprisingly, nuclear power plant of Fukushima Daiichi, the troubled nuclear reactors, partially uses the method of solidification in dealing with a high-level radioactive waste. Believe it or not, that is true. I went to the site and I saw it by my eyes. And the funny thing is that there is the like a tourist spot of the nuclear waste site, dumping site, and there is the like a guide, female guide, very kind and gentle lady, escorted me and showed me around the nuclear waste dump site. It's called Ripplun Fukushima, which is located 10 kilometers south to the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. So if you go to Fukushima, there is a very nice thing to see for the visitors. Okay, number 5. I'm sorry. Okay, Japanese government and TEPCO insist that in a treated radioactive water, the only radioactive materials remaining in the water is lithium, tritium. It's a jawbreaker. Tritium, okay, and other radioactive materials such as cesiums and uraniums and strontium are under safety regulation level according to the Japanese government. But Japanese government and TEPCO has been misreading mass media by making them believe that the only radioactive material contained in a treated water is a tritium, which is inaccurate. It is not true. It is not true. Because why do I know that? Why can I say that? Because TEPCO, the owner and operator of the nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi, themselves publishes the monthly data of the treated water. Surprisingly, I read them through it and found out that outside tritium, cesium and the strontium, they all remains in the treated water. I was shocked because I found it in the TEPCO's published press releases. Wow. So even TEPCO admits that tritium is not only the radioactive material, but also other radioactive materials still remains and in a treated water and dumped into the ocean. The Japanese government insists that those other than tritium radioactive materials such as cesium and strontium are under the safe level according to Japanese government regulations. But once again, as I said in the number 2, their standard is the treated water is safe if you drink it. If you take it, a human body takes the water inside, it will cause no problem. That is claim of Japanese government. But once again, I have to say that the criteria, the standard which should be applied to the environmental protection is different. The criteria, the standard, regulation which should be applied when dumping some radioactive or chemical materials into the ocean should be the precautionary principles, which is that if you cannot prove the material is safe when released in the environment, you should not do it. You should not discharge it or release it. See? Okay. And as I said, number 6 is that tritium is not only radioactive material in the treated water from Fukushima Daiichi, but the Japanese government, in the Japanese government ministries, MITI, Ministry of Industry, Trade, and I'm sorry, I forgot. Anyway, the MITI is the ministry in charge of disposing of treated water into the ocean, because they are regulators of Japanese a nuclear power plant in Japan. This is very also contradictory because Japanese government is pro-nuclear power. I would not say that is wrong, because in terms of energy portfolio, 98% of Japanese energy, 98% of the energy sources of Japan is imported from other countries, overseas. And 60% of Japanese electricity is generated by the petroleums. Mostly, not only petroleums, but also the coals. So very infamous for producing massive amount of the carbon dioxide. 30% of Japanese electricity is produced by nuclear power, and the rest, the 10% of Japanese electricity is generated by the hydrogen power, hydropower. So, MITI is in charge of maintaining the stable supply of Japanese energy sources. So they are obsessed of nuclear power because of energy shutdown. Let's say if some Japanese sea line of communication is blocked by some war or international conflict or pirates, whatever, they are obsessed that they are very, very worried that we lose electricity. Okay? Back to the point. What were we talking? Yes. And the misinformation which is published by Japanese government is that tritium, radioactive material, is released into the ocean, disposed into the ocean by every nuclear power plants of the world, which is partly true. Yes, which is partly true, because tritium is discharged from nuclear power plants, from, let's say, like power plants in India and Korea, China, United States, everywhere, because it's inevitable. And I will not talk deeper into why tritium is produced and disposed water from nuclear power plants. But the big difference of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and the other nuclear power plants of the world is that Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is only nuclear power plants which dispose water which directly contacted of a radioactive nuclear fuel rod. In addition, the fuel rod is now melted down, and now it's called debris. Melt down into the bottom of the pressure vessels, so-called reactors. And we have 3 reactors which has melted down molten radioactive materials in nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi. 3! Wow! Japan is number 1. I'm sorry, it was a bad joke. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is the only nuclear power station which would dispose nuclear radioactive water, even if it's treated, directly contacted with these highly radioactive materials. In the rest of the world, in a healthy nuclear power plant, the waters, it's called coolant water, which directly contact nuclear fuel rods. Okay, believe it or not, this is a nuclear pressure vessel, reactors, and this is the nuclear fuel rod. Okay, make believe, and the water fills here. Okay, and after the fuel rod causes a nuclear fission. Yes, not fusion, fission. Big apology for my bad English. The water boils up, heated up, becomes a steam. Then it goes into the turbine, and then turbine rotate and then generate the electricity. And those steams, which has like a 300 centigrade temperature, has a returns to the nuclear reactor. The loop of this nuclear radioactive water, the loop is sealed, and those coolant water, which is highly radioactive because it contacts the power fuel rod will never go outside of this loop. But because this coolant water is very hot, like 300 centigrade, it has to be cooled down. So they suck up pure water or seawater from ocean or river. In Japanese case, we observe coolant water from sea because we have very small rivers which cannot supply enough water to cool down the nuclear power plants. This is very different from the United States or European nuclear power plant systems. So we pump up seawater, then make the secondary water loop. Okay? Then this is the water loop number 1. You see. And this is water loop number 2, which is number 1 is radioactive. Number 2 is pure water, non-radioactive. The two water loops are connected by heat exchanger. You know what heat exchanger is? It can transfer the heat of this water loop into pure water loop. Only heat transfer, not radioactivity transfer. Not at all. Only the heat transfers from the first water loop into the secondary water loop. Then this little bit hot, I should say warm water is disposed into the ocean because it is non-radioactive. This is called, in Japanese we call it onhaisui, which means warm disposed water, which is like a 6 degrees centigrade Celsius. Yes, 6 degrees Celsius higher than seawater, and it discharges into seawater. But by using heat exchanger, those two water loops never contact. But unfortunately, lithium is produced in this process because this water loop has many radioactive materials. So it causes H2O, which means water, into H3O, and it dissolves into tritium. So that is only radioactive material which is produced and discharged into the ocean from the rest of the world. I mean, the rest of the world are nuclear power plants. But in case of Fukushima Daiichi troubled nuclear reactor, there are many remains of other radioactive materials such as cesium and strontium, sometimes uranium, blah 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 blah. So, Japanese government and TEPCO call it tritium water. I mean, they call the treated radioactive water, quote, tritium water, end of quote, which is untrue, which is inaccurate, untrue. So, Fukushima Daiichi is now the only one nuclear power plant in the world that discharges into the ocean nuclear radioactive materials. So, Japanese government and TEPCO is now conducting a massive amount of propaganda by using the social networks and also TV commercials, which claims that their water disposing water is safe under the government's regulation. And also, other nuclear power plants do the same thing. Like, every nuclear power plant of the world dispose tritium water into the ocean. That is what Japanese government says. Then why shouldn't we? Then why can't we? We can do this because everybody else does. This is a very Japanese favorite logic. We can do it because everybody else does it. Very Japanese. But I cannot agree with them because the stress on the oceanic system is reaching the limit. So the adding other stress on oceanic system is bad, is wrong, in my belief. So, even if everybody else does it, Japanese government should say, we don't do that. But they betrayed my expectation, unfortunately. Okay, let's get back to the points. Number 8. Even if Japanese government and TEPCO dump treated radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean, only 33% of the stored contaminated water would be released, because the rest of the stored water, which is 67% of the stored water, is too radioactive, by far too radioactive. So they cannot fulfill even the Japanese government standard. So they have to keep it on the ground in a tank. I should say tanks after tanks. So the discharging the treated radioactive water cannot be the final solution of accumulation of contaminated water. Only 33% can be discharged into the ocean. That's a very important point, okay? Only 33%. 67% of the contaminated water must be kept, stored on ground from now. So this causes a very serious problem, a serious question to me, which is, why should we damage and sacrifice environmental system to solve the problem of only 33%? Because 67% of the problem still remains even after we damage environmental system. Okay, number 9. TEPCO has been claiming that they have to dump treated radioactive water into ocean because they do not have spaces to store the radioactive water anymore, which is, I discovered, untrue. Okay, here's a system. TEPCO claims that they have no space in nuclear power plant. Fukushima Daiichi. Fukushima Daiichi has like 5 or 6 reactors. It has 3.5 square kilometers space, right? Then the contaminated water used to be like a coolant of the meltdown debris of the nuclear fuel rods, and it causes came out, on and on, because the decay heat of the fuel rod did not disappear, did not stop. Still, it has a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. So they put tanks after tank until they fill up the nuclear power plant site. But then what? So they are claiming that they have no space anymore. But please remember, please note, within a radius of 20 kilometers from this Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is a no man's land, almost no man's land. 80% of residents evacuated, and they did not return even after 12 years. So they decided to the surrounding site spaces of a nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi. This space as a contaminated ground, garbages and radioactive garbages, and also like soils, dump site. So the around the nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi, 70 square kilometers, 17 kilometers, square kilometers, are dump site of radioactive soil. So I got a question. Why don't TEPCO store or temporarily, even if temporarily, put these tanks to the outside nuclear radioactive soil dump site? Why shouldn't they do that? Because there are many wide empty spaces, and their spaces are not inhabited. There used to be 4,300 people living in this area, but they are all kicked out. Not kicked out. Well, they are paid, or rent, or they sold a land patch. But anyway, there are enough empty spaces to keep those tanks temporarily. So we can buy times. We don't have to dump the radioactive water in August 24. We could wait. We could have waited. Japanese government and TEPCO could have waited, buy time, then think it over. Consider if disposing this treated water into the ocean is the best solution, or if there is a solution which can store this radioactive water on ground. As I said before, there are two options. One is evaporation. The other is the solidification mortarization by putting cements into the contaminated water. So I checked up the like a discussion of within the like a committee organized by MIDI, but they did not consider these alternatives. Well, they did consider. They did mention these options, but without any particular basis, they eliminated those options. And from the beginning, the MIDI was leading these committee members that ocean dumpage is the only solution. Very sad, very unfortunate, and very sad. And misinformation number 10 is Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, Mr. Kishida, said that the dumping, discharging or releasing whatever treated radioactive water is needed or inevitable for the reconstruction of Fukushima and other damaged area destroyed by the earthquake and nuclear accident. But that is not true. Untrue. Not at all. Because even if you dump these waters into the ocean, what we will see is that one tank will disappear after discharging the water. 2 tanks will disappear after discharging the treated water. 3 will disappear. 4, 5, all disappear from a nuclear power plant site. But it has nothing to do with outside the nuclear power plant. Nothing. Nothing at all. So the dumping those treated radioactive water has nothing to do with reconstruction of the damaged, radioactively contaminated area. Okay? I'm giving an example. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has 3.5 square kilometers. 3.5. How big is a damaged, contaminated area of nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daiichi? The answer is 628 square kilometers is contaminated. And this is a minimum number because I calculated this number by the area whose residents were forcefully evacuated for 5 or 6 years. In the shortest case, it was 6 years. In the longest case, 12 years. The residents of this 628 square kilometers were forcefully evacuated. And they don't come back. Let's say, this means like this is a nuclear power plant, and mandatory evacuation zone, no man's land, has 20 kilometers diameters. Radius, I'm sorry. Diameter is 40 kilometers. So within this area, only 20% of the former residents, residents before the nuclear accident, is now back. And within the 10 kilometers of nuclear power plants, okay, 10 kilometers. 92% of the former residents disappeared because of the evacuation. After forcefully evacuated for like 6 to 12 years, they decided not to come back because they cannot live in a house which was empty for 12 years. This is natural. The house is radioactive. The land, everything on the ground is radioactive. So the resident decided not to come back. So when the resident did not come back, supermarkets did not come back. Hospitals, doctors decided not to come back. So even if they come back, there is no infrastructure for the normal living. Hospitals, shoppings, let's say, what else? Water supply and electricity, they are okay. But even if electricity and water supply is okay, should they come back to their hometowns if they cannot shop without driving car like 2 hours? They don't. And most of the these areas residents are elderly citizens, so they need to consult doctors regularly, like high blood pressure or diabetes, blah blah blah. They have many. It's natural. Elderly people has some health issues, so they need clinics, hospitals, and doctors nearby. But they're gone. So they decided not to come back. Very sad. So even if TEPCO dump these treated radioactive water into ocean, they don't come back. Because there are two things: radioactive water and their hometowns emptiness. No man's land has no connection. They're different things. One thing, the other. Totally different. Am I making sense? I hope so. And the other misinformation done by Prime Minister Kishida is that the dumping the water, treated water, is needed, inevitable, for the decommission. Hairo is called in Japanese. It's called hairo, decommission of the troubled nuclear reactors, which is also untrue. No. Yes, untrue. Let me amend it. What Prime Minister Kishida said is untrue. Okay, let me explain. Even if TEPCO dump those treated radioactive water into the ocean, it does not speed up decommission of the troubled nuclear reactors, because ultimately decommission of a troubled meltdown nuclear reactors cannot be finished even if they don't pull out all these meltdown radioactive materials inside the reactors. And Fukushima Daiichi power plants, they have like almost 750 to 800 tons of meltdown radioactive material. In case of 3 Mile Island accident, the meltdown fuel load was 130 tons. So in Fukushima's case, it's huge. The weight 800 ton is as heavy as 4 or 5 storied mid-sized apartment house. Unbelievable. So even if they fail or they cannot pull out these meltdown fuel rods, they cannot complete the commission of troubled nuclear reactors. So even if you dump these waters, would not speed up the commission of reactors. Not a second. Not a second. Because they are totally separate, different operations. Dumping the water into ocean and putting out nuclear fuel rods are totally different operations which has nothing to do with each other. Once again, I would say, even if TEPCO dump the treated radioactive water into the ocean, it would not speed up the decommission, not a second. It is the truth, but this is very inconvenient truth. As Albert Gore, ex-vice president of the United States, said, it's very inconvenient truth for the Japanese government. And honestly, this video is an English version, but I made a Japanese version before, and has surprisingly huge number of the viewers, like 84,000. Today is 31st of August 2023. After publishing the video, Japanese version of my commentary video, in the last 5 days, it drew attention, huge attention of the public. And now it has viewed by 84,000 viewers, audience. It's unbelievable. And finally, in the end, I must say what unfortunate about Japanese public is that our mainstream media, Japanese mainstream media, such as newspapers and TV networks, are not questioning Japanese government policy about nuclear power stations accidents, or nuclear power policy, or the way they deal with nuclear waste and contaminated water. They do not question. So, Japanese public has very, very few channels of information to know the truth. So, as I said before, I am free from those restrictions from corporate journalism. So, well, what's a restriction of a corporate journalism is that they are under the control of advertisers and the government. Now, to be accurate, maybe not by the government, but they are too friendly. They do not question authority. They do not question the government policy. And also, they are under the control of a big advertisers, which is electric company. TEPCO, Tokyo Electric, something, TEPCO. is a huge advertiser of newspapers and the TV stations. TEPCO is even a shareholder of one of the Japanese major TV network, which is Fuji Television. Fuji, like Mount Fuji. Fuji Television stock share is held by TEPCO. Excuse me. So we do not have independent journalism free from advertisers' control or the government control in Japan. We do not. We do not have New York Times. We do not have Washington Post or the Times or Le Monde here in Japan. Japan is not like those Western democratic countries. To be more accurate, we do not have a democratic, independent mass media like those Western democratic countries have. That's very unfortunate, especially when, in case of crisis like this, nuclear power plant accident, its aftermath, and discharging radioactive water into the ocean. This is very unfortunate. This is unfortunate not only for Japanese public, but for the global citizens, public of the world. So I used to be the part of those Japanese mainstream media. I was an insider. So I can talk about the problems of Japanese mainstream media more in English. But today, I have to finish this program now. Okay, thank you for listening. And I do really hope you will get my message. I'm releasing the message in a bottle on YouTube. So I hope someday someone will get my message. Okay. Thank you for listening. And have a good day. And peace may prevail on our planet. Thank you very much.